personally, I think they got into a room just before the budget was announced and realised that they had a shortfall. And this is my personal view, obviously, and looked at their forecast and looked at this industry and thought, who's not going to cry for these guys? But, you know, they can survive on a 90% tax increase on revenue. And they just chose to ignore everything that was being said.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Bingo, bango, bongo, Savvas Fellas. Here we go. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Just off a flight, but feeling fresh.
I like it. Yeah, well, UK to Malta is manageable.
Yeah, 3 hours.
Yeah,
it was like over in a blink.
It's a good one. Well, Savvas, obviously, for those of the listeners who don't know you, you're the CEO for MrQ, and you are a kind of like very well-respected, mid-sized operator in the UK, regulated space, and your business obviously is going through some pretty tumultuous reality at the moment now that the UK powers of be decided to completely overthrow the tax regime in the gambling space here. What happened exactly?
With the tax?
Yes.
Personally, I think they got into a room just before the budget was announced and realised that they had a shortfall. And this is my personal view, obviously. I don't know this to be true at all. And realised where could they make another big saving, and looked at their forecast and looked at this industry and thought, who's not going to cry for these guys? Let's go. We've done all the consultations. We've done all the virtual signalling pieces. But you know, they can survive on a 90% tax increase on revenue. And they just chose to ignore everything that was being said. And I don't know why. I don't know why they did that. Yeah,
so obviously the UK market is facing a tax increase of up to 40% after April 1st, when this new tax regime comes into force. And just to set the tone a bit, maybe, Savvas, can you talk about your brand, MrQ, and maybe talk about the history?
Sure.
When did it all begin? How have you built this company? And talk a little bit more about that.
So we launched MrQ in August of 2018. So what's that? So 8 years-ish. And before that, I was an affiliate and then a white label operator. So I was both advertiser and publisher. So I was on both sides of the equation. And I had about maybe 8 or 9 different white label brands, so-called brands, where I basically dealt with all of the acquisition, all of the retention, and I left all of the boring stuff to the software provider, what I used to call boring stuff. And then eventually did that. That was pretty good. And I started getting frustrated because the ideas were coming in and I would take them back to these software providers and they were like, well, you're not really that big enough for us to really care about this idea. It's a nice idea, but maybe not now. And so there was no real meritocracy. It was based on how much revenue you delivered, not on the merit of your idea. And so that started the frustration. And I was like, this can't be that hard. So why don't I just take the money that I've got and that I'm making in this nice lifestyle business and try and repurpose it and try and fix all of this stuff, or the stuff that at least frustrated me. And so I set out to do that. And, you know, famously, my last words were like, how hard could it be to build a random number generator? But tunnel vision kicks in, you know, you get complete focus on it. And eventually 2018, we launched it. Now, I should say that MrQ is a bootstrapped, founder-led organization. So for anyone who doesn't know, bootstrap means that we're self-funded, which basically changes the risk profile of a business, because you don't really answer to shareholders. Like, you answer to yourself. You dance to the beat of your own drum. And I also wanted to have a values-led organization, because I believe that if you had strong values, everything else would follow. So top line revenue, bottom line revenue, it would all just follow with strong values, especially when everyone coming into the business was coming in through those values. So they are aligned to those values. And the rest is kind of history. We fixed all of the things that used to frustrate me. And I think in this industry, people aren't bold enough. And I think from a narrative perspective, we tell it as it is. And I like that honesty, because I think it's a reflection of those cultures and those values. So when we say you win some, you lose some, and more recently, you'll love us when you win, you'll hate us when you lose, love Q, hate Q. It's just honest. Like, that's the honest approach to what real money gaming is, because the reality is that you will lose. You might win, and we hope that whatever happens, whatever the outcome is, you had an entertaining experience. We sell entertainment.
Yeah, brilliant. And UK is the single market that you
It is,
in?
yeah,
Yes.
by design.
Yeah.
We're choosing to stay there. I know it's pretty hostile. There's lots of regulation. There's loads of things that are constantly moving, not just the tax increase now, but there's historically been loads of things. You know, the ground's always moving beneath us, but there's a part of me that thinks that's part of the fun of it. And plus focus. If you
there's a word for that when you enjoy pain, I think. Yeah,
sadist, sadomasochist.
That's it.
But you know, all of the challenges are fun.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, what was your reaction when this announcement came of the 40% taxes? Was this expected, or how did you feel when this announcement?
I mean,
was made?
I don't know anyone who scenario planned for a 90% tax increase. Everyone who I've spoke to had definitely ran some sort of scenario planning. We did too. We didn't run this particular scenario. Well, tell a lie, we ran somewhere close to it. I didn't think they would do it. I didn't think they were mad enough to do it. And even like 3 weeks after, I think there was general sense of shock. I would say even now, I know a few people now who are still like, I can't believe it, I can't believe it. But you got to get over it and just crack on.
Yeah. And so, like, if we were to dive into the economics of this decision and the impact that it has on any given operator in the UK, 40% of revenues goes directly to tax. How does that impact the financials of a company like MrQ?
I mean, there's lots of economics that are involved in it. So you can distill it down to lifetime value and customer acquisition costs. And a lot of businesses and operators will look at the LTV to CAC ratio. And so what this does is it extends how long your payback windows will be. So the LTV side of that equation is massively extended. The customer acquisition cost, we can assume will fall down because some players will drop out of the market. And so it basically boils down to LTV to CAC. But one thing you can know for sure is that the LTV side of the equation that's where most of the disruption happens. And so it then becomes a case of how do I rebalance that particular formula? So LTV, you could argue, is about loyalty and retention. So what can I do to have the best retention, to get the best loyalty out of consumers in a market where they're pretty flippant anyway? And then also customer acquisition costs. So if I can extend my LTV and if I can reduce my customer acquisition cost, I might be able to rebalance everything to form this new normal, in addition to a load of periphery stuff that you could do in terms of, you know, the structure within the organization, who you're hiring, how much you're spending, you know, attribution modeling when it comes to how you buy media, sponsorships, branding, like, you know, how much money do we want to put there in a channel where attribution's a bit weak? So there's a huge amount of moving parts, and even though we've seen some of this play out, we won't see all of it until, I'd say, Q3. I mean, the tax hasn't even like come into effect yet, and everyone is doing different things. But you are seeing there are some changes that I've seen already.
Yeah. And what operators do you think will be the most vulnerable in this space? I mean, you guys, maybe to your advantage in one sense, is you're so focused on the UK, so you can really hit this problem head on in terms of how you structure your organization. Others maybe are in different markets. Which operators are most impacted, do you think?
I mean, everyone knows the Evoke story.
Right.
Everyone knows that Aspire's also pulled out of the UK. There's a couple of kind of rumours knocking around in terms of other people who might drop out. I think we were really lucky to insulate the business in 25. So 25 was a massive growth year for us, where we kind of broke out of the, you know, we were really trying to go from startup to scale up. And most of that truly happened in 25. And so we've insulated the business to be able to take a hit like this. But I think there is a broad range of revenue. I think if you sit anywhere between 10 and maybe 60 mil in revenue, that this will hurt you. But then it's not just that, obviously headcount costs and efficiencies within an organization, but it really depends on the structure of the business and how, I mean, personally, I boil it down to culture and values. Like, it's in these moments where you see teams come together. It's in these moments of, you could label it a crisis. I think it was the founder of Hewlett Packard who had once said, I'm going to paraphrase this, but bad companies are destroyed by a crisis. Good companies survive a crisis. Great companies are defined by a crisis. And I think we personally at MrQ are taking the view that this is a crisis and it will define us, because what we do now is because of this. So innovation, efficiency, attribution, culture, values, mission statement, all of that stuff now has to be elevated. And ultimately, if you do a good job of that, you'll come out way stronger. Same as what Brian Chesky at Airbnb had said for COVID. He kind of leaned on the same HP quote, and, you know, they survived that really well.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And to bring it back to the industry, I think up until kind of like the mid 2010s, there was a sense that kind of everyone was doing well, and building an operator is not hard, to your point earlier. But there was a big transition in the industry then when more markets regulated locally. And at some point you started to see which companies were actually operating well, and which were and who were just kind of in the right time, in the right place, and enjoying the moment kind of thing. And this seems to be another one of those moments.
Well, it's weird because, like, the whole point about, like, being in the UK, the minute you go to a different market, there's definitely going to be a loss of focus. You have to operate differently because you're regulated by a different set of license conditions. CRM's different, operations is different, customer support is different. You've got currency challenges, you've got time challenges. Everything changes, and for the most part, it's a one-way door decision. Once you've done it, that's it. You're pregnant with it for a while. Whereas if you stay UK focused, like, the problem space is well defined. The problem isn't the problem space. The problem is the loss of focus and maintaining a focus that you have. So the amount of debates. I should say debating is my love language, so I welcome them. But the amount of debates where everyone is like, why aren't we doing Canada? Why aren't we doing a Malta license? Why aren't we doing X, Y, and Z? I'm like, for all the reasons that I've just stated, unless you give me another reason to lose my focus in the UK, of which there is plenty to go after, why? Tell me why, and I'll tell you why not.
Yeah. There's another great business principle by Jim Collins, like the GOAT of business theory.
He's good to great, isn't he?
Good to great. There you go. Yeah, you know it. Built by choice, how the mighty might fall, and all these things. And he talks about businesses don't die because lack of opportunity. They die because they get too much opportunity, and they lack the patience to stay focused.
Yeah. Well, it's weird you say that, because usually opportunities come up and shiny, as entrepreneurs, as CEO founders, I think we're hardwired to like shiny new things, to try and fix things. And there's a real discipline to say no. I've said no to a few things recently because of Jim Collins.
Good. Yeah, he's a good author to have in mind when we. I speak about it in our monthly meetings. I always bring up a principle by Jim Collins.
I love that,
But yeah, nonetheless, back to the UK. So just going back to the economics of this. I mean, there are few operators with an EBITDA margin of north of 20-ish%, in the industry. And here we are talking about a decision that will immediately wipe off any such margin that an operator already has, right? So in order to get back to kind of profitability, I mean, there has to be cuts across the board, right? I mean, you need to renegotiate affiliate deals, you need to renegotiate with various suppliers, right? Like, how do you, without going into detail perhaps, but the whole supply chain must be disrupted by this, right? In order for the operator to kind of regain.
The obvious areas to go after are the supply chain, all the gaming suppliers, all the PSP contracts, payroll, who you're hiring, and justifying that hire, and even going beyond that and looking at, structure as a strategy. We had this structure in a pre 40% tax, which was really nice, and you could spend a little bit more frivolously on all these great hires and all these great things that you want to do. That has obviously come into scrutiny. So, but it's not just that. Obviously, RTPs is an area, but
yeah, that's the thing. Even the players are affected in this.
So the players will be affected with RTPs, with how much in terms of offerings and promotions. You can't do that much. It's just become 90% more expensive. The problem with some of these operators at the top of the food chain is they had already made these RTB reductions. And so how low can you go? Like some of these suppliers, these gaming suppliers don't offer what they want, and because they've already taken that down in advance of the tax, where do you go? Like it's baked into the business. Like you can't survive without these lower RTPs. Whereas for us, I like to think that we kept it at 96s, 97s, knowing that this could happen. And then the minute it happened, we had no choice but to make some adjustments there. And even then, we've gone down to, and I've got, I was pretty open about this, it's 94s for the most part. So we've dropped in the past couple of months, whereas others are dropping to 92s. I've heard of 87s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's 87. Pretty bad. Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, but also the way that the RTP is baked into a game, it's not as black and white as people think it is. A lot of it is, you've got the bonus RTP and you've got the normal RTP, and together they form the RTP. So it's not quite as black and white as that, but the principle still stands. People will lose more quicker.
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily change how much income they have for this sort of activity, but what it does say is that you might have a retention problem over long term.
Right. How do you think about the acquisition part of the equation? Like, how will you work with affiliates in the future, for example? Is that still an important way to acquire players versus going out to the kind of mainstream? Asking for a friend here. We may or may not be affiliates in the regulated UK space.
It's difficult. It's difficult because it depends on each partner, how much they deliver, what the composition of the rev share is, what the CPA is, the volume and the quality of the players, how many of those partners you have, because you could say, hey, I only want to work with a couple who will deliver most of the volume. And in doing so, they're going to take a haircut with CPAs or rev shares or whatever else it may be. And so there's a bit more to play for from affiliates perspective. And the operator is saying, I'm going to give you a little bit more and I'm going to get rid of all these other partners. But I think more broadly speaking, attribution modeling will be a big thing, like halo effects, last click attribution, first click attribution. Historically, we've not been very good at this. And digital performance marketing, it's tough. If I run a display campaign and it just serves loads and loads of impressions and costs me quite a bit of money because it's all based on impression charges, but it doesn't generate any players, but this channel over here is working really well. Well, now you actually really need to know whether this had a halo effect on this. If there was a post-impression attribution on a channel that performed really well, like everyone has got to get their house in order with this sort of stuff. And then outside of that, you've got brand and sponsorship, which it's that problem space times 10, because your front of shirt sponsor for Watford, how do you know what that does? I mean, the first question most people ask me is like, does Watford pay back? Well, I don't know. Like holistically, you can say yes.
Yeah.
But when you zoom in, it gets a bit muddy.
Yeah, there's only so much you can measure directly, let's say, and then there's that value on the peripheral, let's say, that is just very, very hard.
Well, there's marketing mix models, MMMs, that you can do, where basically a bunch of analysts will look at every single piece of media that you bought. They'll piece it all together. It's a little black box, if you ask me. I still don't fully understand it, but they'll say to you, based on all of this was a good deal. Yeah. And you kind of have to trust it. Yeah, it's, it's a bit mad.
So this leads to my next question. Speaking about lower RTPs, less bonus costs, less budget for affiliates and so on. People are talking about that this is, a giveaway to the black market, essentially for the black market operators to really take over the space in the UK currently. What's your thoughts on how that will all play out from 1st of April?
Badly. I think it would be bad. I think it would be really bad. I think the black market operators have zero moral compass. They really don't care. They will take the view of like, you should be able to do whatever you want with your money. And so what if you're on GamStop? Come over here. And there are no protection measures. You don't really know if you're going to get withdrawals. We are pushing players into their hands. Players aren't educated or aware. Why should they be? Players care about value for money. You've seen a little bit of this with tobacco industry, who are now saying, hey, stop buying cigarettes off street corners. It's not good for you. It's not good for the government coffers either. And I think you'll see a lot of that, but it's fairly intangible. And the challenge is to come together as an industry with the regulator, with media, to counter this somehow. You already saw some of it recently. There was an article on the BBC. Someone had fallen prey to the black market, had paid the ultimate price and took their life because of this. And even that headline didn't really call it out for what it truly was. It was a black market operator who had attracted that player, who was on GamStop and had taken all necessary precautions, but still didn't have that protection. And the regulator's job is to protect players, and they failed. Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine for any given player in the UK space today that, let's say that you play on a regulated site, you have the unfortunate, low RTP, and eventually at some point, the same player finds themselves into the black market where, the kind of major black markets operators, you are going to get your money paid out. There is like maybe not that issue of trust, let's say, between the player and the operator in many cases. And you'll get that deposit bonus, you'll get higher RTP. It seems to me once the player finds that space, it will be very difficult to return to the regulated space, because why would they? Like, do they really care if an operator has a UKGC license? If they feel like, well, everyone online, when I read reviews, everyone seems to be paid out, there doesn't seem to be any risk with my deposit here and whatnot. What do you think, like, in that space? Like, what is the USP, in your opinion, for the player to stay with MrQ?
I think there has to be. It's a good question. Like, why would someone choose MrQ with lower RTPs over some relatively unknown brand that has high RTPs, really good deposit match bonuses, promotions coming out of their ears? Trust, I think, is a big thing that we don't talk about enough. And as I said before, like with the way that we tell the story, the brand story, there is a high degree of trust, because we're calling the industry or the category out for what it truly is. And I think that cultivates a degree of trust. Now, I think there's a lot more work to do in terms of, you're saying one thing from a brand proposition, but your product actually has to deliver on that. And so we actually have to think about more unique ways to sell entertainment. So prize draws, like, why can't operators take on a bit of an Omaze type offering? What about lottery? Like, that could be quite good as well. So you need to enhance the product offering, which the black market's not going to do. They're so busy kind of making money in the traditional way that they've got no reason to innovate. And so innovation, I think, will play a big part. The problem is that trying to survive as well as thrive at the same time doesn't really happen. So you're either surviving or you're thriving. And so only the few who get over the hump of the tax will be able to start thinking about thriving. And risk profile will play a part. So bootstrapped, we have a different risk profile. Whereas another operator who might have shareholders, who might have, pretty strict board and low risk profile, they're not going to try and innovate. They're just going to try and survive. So you're in this kind of weird spot between a rock and a hard place. But I think innovation will be a thing. I think brand trust will be a big thing. But for the most people, they won't even feel it. But for the people who do feel it and who do come into harm's way, they will feel it the most. And it might be too late before they even realize that they're in trouble.
Right. And what responsibility does the regulator play in this space to try to keep the players on the regulated side? What can they actually do from here on? Do you think there is an effective way to regulate against the black market?
It's a tough job. Andrew Rhodes, I think, did a good job, but he's obviously on his way out now. I should probably say that we haven't done ourselves any favours in this industry. You've got fines of £19.2 million being the highest in the UK. Like, how bad must things have gotten in that audit process for the regulator to say, I need to fine you £20 million because you've made so much money from dropping the ball over here that this is the cost of it now. So I think it's important to think about that for a second. We have not done ourselves any favours. The regulator doesn't have a mandate to grow or to contract the market, but they do have a mandate to protect the market from this common enemy of the black market. And I think they've failed there as well. So it's not black and white. I think both sides have failed, us more than the regulator. But now they have to, and they haven't stopped this tax either, which only compounds the problem of black market. So I think they dropped the ball there as well. But there's only so much power that they have. But now, this is the new world. We need to worry about the things that we can control, and tax is not one of them. But from a regulator's perspective, if it were me, I would be going after PSPs, all these payment service providers that keep spinning up, that keep attracting these black market operators and working through them, and game providers. game providers have a lot to answer for. Now, I know some of them take a stance of, we do not publish any of our content on a black market operator website. So I would be shutting all of that down as soon as possible, because they can spin up new brands, they can spin up new URLs. This is their bread and butter. They know exactly what they're doing, but you really need to hit them where it hurts, and most of that will be in payments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. If a player is having a hard time to deposit, or they can't play their favorite games, that seems to be a pretty big USP for
Take it all
their
away.
regulated space.
Yeah.
So I'm curious as well, since margins are squeezed to the point that they will be from 1st of April, there must be like an element of economies of scale here, that like the bigger you are, the more efficient you can run. So that should mean that the market will consolidate. Right, the major operators will have an advantage against the smaller operators, you would imagine. Do you think, and also it seems to me when I speak to different stakeholders, it seems almost like the UKGC is favoring to some extent maybe the bigger operators. Is there a sense, do you think, that the UK market in the long run could turn out a little bit similar to US, for example, where you just have a handful of massive operators that control the entire space, and it's just will become more and more difficult for smaller operators to exist in the market?
Yeah, I think the logic is sound. The economies of scale logic. I would, and I agree for the most part, but I think we'll see a ton of consolidation, but not just with operators and market share. I think you'll maybe even see it in the supply chain as well. Like, think about someone like Tombola. Tombola is all proprietary, obviously owned by Flutter, which is huge, who own FanDuel, and they've got first-party content. It's really kind of fair in terms of, it's a particular cohort that they go after. It's not like a hardened slots player. It's little and often. You know, they've got good mitigations for safer gambling and AML stuff. That works really nice, but they control that content supply chain. They still have PSPs. They still have all the third-party tools and services that they use. But that model is quite nice. And so I think you'll see some of what you're saying for the reasons that you're saying it, but I also think it will actually go one step deeper. Imagine owning the PSP or the game supplier or all of the supply chain. You can really make it work there, so you can kind of make up for that 90% tax here in other areas of the business. But I don't think it would just boil down to that. I think the innovation piece still we have to do a lot. It's still like, casinos are still boring. But then economies of scale in terms of the regulator wanting a few people to regulate. I think they've almost engineered this outcome and would much prefer to regulate a few big beast operators rather than loads of mid-tier operators. You know, that helps them. That's easy for them. And I don't blame them for wanting that either, because it must be very, very hard. I don't know what the official stat is on how many licenses are issued, but it can't be an easy job. I mean, when we had them in October 24, which was our last audit here in Malta, it's 4 days. It's 4 days of just grueling account reviews. Like, you can spend 3 hours on one account, you know, and they're doing that for every single license. It's a hard job.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, so if you kind of think about this for the future of MrQ, you know, obviously fees are going up considerably, but on the other hand, you have a kind of advantage that UK, like we mentioned before, is your one and only market that you can really hone in on and so on. Do you see this as like now we go into survival mode and we are trying to survive, or as you mentioned before, are you looking at this as a way to thrive? In other words, do you see opportunities in any way through this?
I think the opportunities are massive. I definitely don't want to be running a company that is purely in survival mode. That is not fun at all. And maybe for a few minutes it'll be fun when your back's up against the wall. You know, what do you do? But that quickly wears off. And so I think product innovation will be a thing that we do this year, because if you think about it, most regulated casinos, or most casinos, they look the same, they sound the same, they have the same content providers, they have the same PSPs, they're largely regulated by the same regulator, certainly from my perspective in the UK. Okay, where's the point of differentiation in any of this? And so I appreciate that MrQ is saying things a little bit differently and challenging the category through marketing, but product has to follow suit. And so I think there's a huge vacuum for a real challenger brand when it comes to product. Now, I think the likes of DraftKings, I believe, and I don't say this having known this, but I've heard that there's a lot of good things going on with their product, with Fanatics. I'm trying to kind of figure out how I can get in and start interacting with these products. But I think that gap has not been filled in the UK. Like, why doesn't a casino behave like TikTok? Double taps and scroll rights and left and up and down. Why doesn't a lobby feel like that? Why do all lobbies look and feel the same? Tiles, and that's pretty much your casino lobby. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. So, but we've been so busy trying to survive that we've not got into any of the product development. And as well, it's incredibly difficult to attract real product, like serious execs in the product space into this industry. Very, very, very hard. And so part of the problem is that we don't really have the same talent density. So there's a lot of things at play here, but fundamentally, irrespective of the challenges, I think it will boil down to product.
Yeah. So do you see MrQ still being a single market, single brand?
Yes.
Forever?
Yeah, I think for the next couple of years, I think there is no reason, as I said to you before, like, tell me why we shouldn't stay in the UK. Okay, if the regulator comes out, because I think there's a little bit of an appetite now for banning of advertising and marketing. Like, if that happened, you would make sure that you ran the business in a way where you've saved money for a rainy day and now you pivot. And in that situation, we could pivot tomorrow and that would be fine. But until that existential crisis is really staring us and we're on the business end of it, there's no reason to do it. And so I think you hold your nerve, you're fearful when others are greedy when others are fearful, to quote Warren Buffett, and you focus on product. Because if I just went now into Canada, I'm not going to get to do any of the product innovation stuff because we're still bootstrapped. We still have to place some bets, hope that they come in, and then we repurpose some of the returns of those bets into our next series of bets. Whereas other operators, of which I know a few of them who are VC backed, and there's no right or wrong here, they can be a lot more liberal with some of this stuff. But in our paradigm, this is how we have to play it. And I'm a believer in the UK market. People are going to consume this form of entertainment, whether we like it or not. Now, do we want them in the black market's hands? No, I think the obvious answer. And when it comes to the regulated, I think there's a unique opportunity for us to kind of dominate there as well, mainly through our risk profile and hopefully a lot of product innovation from this year. I should say we've just attracted a CPO over from Spotify, which was very, very hard. And to the point that I was mentioning before, getting that sort of talent in the business and over some of these preconceived ideas. And even though he had already had a stint at Paddy years ago and had cut his teeth there, it was still hard to attract him back.
Yeah. At the end of the day, still, like, if you've been in the industry at some point, somehow you might find your way back. Yeah, that's why it's a little bit like Lost Island. Yeah, exactly. So I'm curious as well, what do you think the regulator feels about the tax increase in itself? Because their job is to protect, obviously, the players and so on, to ensure that they stay in the regulated space. I would imagine that this is not necessarily a decision from the UKGC, but this comes from the powers of be on top of them.
Rachel from accounts.
From the account department.
I mean, I'm pretty sympathetic to the GC's cause, but I'm also realistic about, you know, what they should be doing. So, you know, even front of shirt sponsorships now in Championship and the Premiership, obviously you can no longer advertise front of shirt in the Premiership, but you're seeing operators go down into the Championship now. But only now are we saying, or is the regulator implying, that you can't have a front of shirt sponsorship on a UK team if you don't have a UK license. Like, oh, come on, like, it's 2026. We're really, really late to the party on this one. So my sympathy only goes to a certain point, because they have the power to revoke that ability. But in terms of the tax, and you're also seeing them take some pretty bold moves when it comes to crypto as well, which is quite good. But in terms of the tax, I imagine their hands were tied to an extent. I imagine they fired off all of the flare guns and used all of their powers, because even they, as a regulator who doesn't necessarily, you know, they're not our biggest champions or cheerleaders, but they know the repercussions of this. So yes, it just goes beyond their powers.
And what responsibility does the BGC have in all of this?
Personally, these are my personal views here, but I don't think the BGC is fit for purpose anymore. They are represented by a tier one operators who have historically not really helped us as an industry. And it's no surprise that no one really listened. Why should we listen to you? Historically, you've been part of the problem. You're compromised. Whereas the likes of Midnight, Stakemate, ourselves haven't really had, you know, a voice at that table, because it is just that BGC table. And so I think there is another vacuum for some sort of coalition to form that isn't just made up of these few tier one operators. And so I don't really know what function the BGC fulfills anymore.
Right, so there may be an opportunity to start anew.
I mean, I've always thought like we could get a load of operators in the room and share notes and ideas in a really kind of organic way, a grassroots way, and then take that to media, take that to the regulator, and just have a different voice, because a lot of these operators, personally, again, they don't represent me or MrQ. And so I think it's coming to that time now where I feel like I need to do something about this narrative, and just having a good representation of what MrQ is, and what I know other operators will be. A case in point, when it came to our audit that I mentioned in October 24, you know, the first thing that we do, and we're insisting on this when it comes to the regulator, because they talk about their values a lot, and what their mission is. And so I was like, I need you guys to understand who we are, what we're about, and what we aspire to be. So we always start those sessions with, you know, the values, mission, and vision piece. And they get a good understanding, and maybe they're like, all right, yeah, fine. Yeah. But then when you get into these audits, they actually see what you're about. So I think it's very important.
Yeah. And do you see a difference in how your relationship evolves with the UKGC based on the values that you bring into the business, or is that not interesting?
No, I do. Obviously, you know, they play their cards very close to their chest. They're not really supposed to have any, you know, they give nothing away in those sort of settings. And as I said, you open up, and I'm sure they've heard it a million times, and they're like, yeah, let's get to the account reviews, please. But then you get to the account reviews and the wider business and policies and how you manage the business in general, and you bring it back to the values. This is value X, this is value Y, showing up in the real world. And I think that you can convince them, but I do think they take a pessimistic view before they see and hear what you're about. And for us specifically, I was invited to the Operator Engagement Forum last year at the UKGC in Birmingham to basically speak about the audit process in front of a load of other operators. And so I take that as a personal win of them saying, listen, you did well. We like you. We like what you're doing. You're building sustainable business that we're happy with. Can you come and share your experience? And so I think it works, but it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, I would imagine so as well. Let's go into some predictions for the UK market. So UK market in 3 years' time. First and foremost, where do you see MrQ's place in the market in 3 years' time? What are you at that time?
3 years' time, MrQ, first and foremost, whatever we do, as long as it's from a place of vision, mission and values. Our vision is to entertain the world, win or lose. Our mission in terms of how we get there is to make every play unforgettable, to burn the rulebook when it gets in the way. And then we have 6 guiding principles which guide our day-to-day decision making. So whatever we do, that has to be true. I think we will steal market share quite significantly and will run away from the pack. I think we will be a different operator. And so this whole sea of sameness that we talk about, I think we will be the outlier with that when it comes to product innovation, and maybe extended where real money gaming can go. So prize picks, bingo, lotteries, there'll be something there. And then maybe as an extended goal, something that shifts the paradigm of what real money gaming means. Why does it have to be a isolated one-to-one experience? Why can't I have shared entertainment with a friend, a stranger? Why can't I have peer-to-peer? In COVID, everyone was playing poker. It ticked all the boxes. It was social. It was a dopamine hit. There was skin in the game. Real money gaming was at play. It brought people together. Why can't we do that as our kind of normal MO? And so I would really, really like some form of shared entertainment.
Can you see yourself building that together with Flutter, for example, that gives you that access to those type of
Flutter,
resources?
if you are watching. I can. Obviously, it's expensive to build something that pushes the boundaries that much. But at the same time, it makes you incredibly resourceful with the limited resources that you have. So MVPs, getting the right product discipline into an org, right person, right seat is something we talk about a lot. So yes, hard, but fundamentally will boil down to the having the right people in the right seats. But I'm hell bent on creating some form of shared entertainment.
Brilliant, Thomas. The black market in 3 years, what will the dynamics be there? More or less market share?
I think the UK market will probably move sideways from a growth perspective. I think you're seeing that in Sweden or Germany, I read the other day. So I think you'll definitely see that. I think they will grow, but I would like to think that the regulator and government have potentially had a slice of humble pie and maybe backtracked on some of this stuff. Maybe there's a reduction in the RGD. But I think that we, together with the regulator and media and government, will potentially prove to be a thorn in their side. And rightly so. We should be calling them out on all fronts. Who are the people who run these businesses? Who are the brands who allow them to sponsor on them? Who are the PSPs? Who are the people behind them? Who are the UBOs? We have to crush them. It's just not acceptable that these guys can come in and treat something that we've built, for better or for worse, in terms of how we got there, like this. So I do feel quite strong about that.
And in terms of the operator landscape in the UK, do you see it being decimated in 3 years' time?
I think it'll shrink. I think you'll see a shit ton of consolidation. So I think you'll have, you'll probably exist in a world of 3 or 4 Flutters that control the entire market, which, might not necessarily be a bad thing as long as they can all have different offerings and they're not more of the sea of sameness. Unfortunately, I do think that you'll probably end up with a lot more of the sea of sameness. I think everyone's just got the same offerings and same games, same content providers, same PSPs, same regulator. And unfortunately, most of them tell a pretty boring story as well. Tombola, Paddy, ourselves are a little bit different in that sense. So I think brand will be important. Unfortunately, in the world that we are about to go into, I don't think many people really care about the brand story, which I think is really important. Look at Liquid Death. I mean, it's just water in a can, but they told an amazing story.
Right.
And that's what resonated with people. And I think we lose sight of that in this industry a lot.
Yeah.
We're so focused on top line and bottom line.
It's numbers. Do you think, is there any brand that you look up to in the industry? Is there any brand who have been able to tell that story really well?
I think Paddy do a really good job. I like the Paddy brand, but I do think it gets a little bit samey, and so it hasn't evolved. But at the same time, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Tombola, again, another Flutter brand. I think they tell a unique story and have a unique offering. Those are the two from a brand perspective that I would probably call out immediately. I'm biased here, but I also like Stakemate, which is a proprietary sports book, which is trying to bring a more social component to sports books, and I really like where that could go. In terms of products, it's a bit you're not really spoiled for choice when it comes to products. As I said, you log into most casinos and they're just the same.
Yeah, Dabble are trying to do something similar. They're entering the
Yes.
UK market too, right? With
That looks pretty
social
cool.
component too.
Yeah.
They like to stand out and have this like a bit.
Yeah, I've seen little bits of that. It is cool, yeah. But and I think they're going to stay to, from what I've heard, just sports books and no other kind of verticals, which I also like. I'm just not convinced that you can sustain it just on the sportsbook side. But first principles, we don't know that is true or not. So
So for any given operator in the UK, the revenue split is like an 80-20 kind of thing between casino 80% or something like that. It's a tough proposition to do sports betting on.
Unless you tell an amazing story and everyone comes to you because of the story that you tell, and you cultivate a load of loyalty and your product shit hot and your brand is consistent and you're doing all the right things. So it's definitely possible, but it's just not been done yet.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose my final question then would be just honing in on that a little bit. To be able to build a brand that you talk about building, doesn't it also take, like the Liquid Death that you mentioned, it takes a bit of a marketing budget behind that story that you are telling, right? So to that point, like if you would have like a seemingly unlimited marketing budget, how would you build MrQ? Then what would you do?
Oh, easy. It's less about the budget per se. It's more about the people behind the budget. So one of the reasons that we were so successful last year was not how we deployed cash. Obviously, that was the outcome of something else. That something else was around building a cohesive leadership team. So, which is surprisingly difficult because you're trying to bring together a small group of people who share the mission and the vision, who are aligned to the values and the way that of doing things, how you work, and can deliver. And attracting those sort of people, as I said before, the talent density in the industry is not great, is the challenge. And then you give your CMO the marketing budget and your COO, the creative license to kind of pretty much do whatever they want within the organizational structure and operationally. CTO, CFO, that's where I would focus. I would spend all my energy and effort on hiring the best executive team, and then I would give them the budget and just like you set a direction of travel, you put the team in place, you give it to them. And that is what worked for us. That's what I would do again if I was starting from scratch. But it took the best part of 3 years, believe it or not, to find a group of 6 people in an organization that is growing and moving to take it to dizzy new heights. Simple, but not.
Exactly. So to summarize here to the Savvas, in a year's time from now when we do this follow-up podcast, you feel under the circumstances, big shock to the company, of course, lots of changes here. But for the most part, you feel like
Pumped.
this is
Pumped.
something you can
Yeah,
face.
we 1000% will ride this out. We will come out winners. There will be winners and losers in this. We've seen some of it play out now. We'll see more of it play out this year. And we will 100% be one of the winners. And you'll see a big shift in terms of product as well. So the brand story that you see now and people seem to like, and it resonates with them both in industry and out of industry, you're going to see that translate into the product, which is the big challenge.
Love it, Savvas. You're obviously one of the most respected industry leaders for a reason. Really appreciate that you coming on here today and spilling the beans on what's going to happen now in the future. And as you said, in a year's time, we'll review.
Just need to go put a bet on a prediction market.
There we go. Maybe prediction market operators is the pivot.
Maybe.
Brilliant, Savvas. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you.